This is the CreaseCast.
The other day, Seattle Kraken announced a program to invest in, I think, the Seattle University, whatever it is, to create a MBA program for people who have diverse backgrounds so that they could hopefully increase the diversity of hockey or people in the hockey landscape. On the other hand, the Canucks at the end of Black History Month had a small little tweet asterisk being like, "Oh yeah, we already committed to the Black Girl Hockey Club pledge."
Yeah, which is good. Which is a good thing.
Good, but it was basically like it was written in a sense like, "We committed to the pledge. Please don't ask us about it. We're doing our best." Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think I forget her Twitter handle, but I know her name's Nikki. She's been really she's been really publicly pushing for that, and then she asked them a follow up.
Shout out to Too Hot for Hockey for being very on board.
Oh yeah, they're the Too Hot for Hockey podcast. That's right.
Yes. And I believe I know someone on that podcast, but
do you? But like she asked them even like a follow up, like, do you plan on doing anything, like any initiatives? And they said something like we're working on that in the background or something. What?
Oh my god!
And it was and they just said we're working on it, which is kind of like, okay, so you don't actually have anything planned, but that's not really why we're here.
What more?
That's not the disaster, the PR disaster we're here to talk about today.
No, you're here to talk about like what a Friday. Like usually in Canucks Nation, Friday is when the lead gets buried and nothing like something important will drop. It'll be buried by like some kind of good news. Today was just an info dump, and not for good reasons. Jim Benning, for the first time since his infamous "we ran out of time" quotes, did a giant press conference with all available media, and man, oh man, he could have laid up some softballs, but what's the worst batting percentage in baseball? Because that was
0.
What that was. Okay, so
I believe it's a 0.
He batted a 0, man. But the thing is, it's like he batted a 0. He struck out. He did that strikeout where you spin and you hit yourself in the back of the head with the bat after spinning.
Oh, the Looney Tunes. The
Looney Tunes, yes. It was like that.
Or you swing the bat and then you realize that the bat is actually a stick of dynamite that's on fire.
And it blows up.
And then you make like the face at the camera, yes. And then it explodes.
Exactly.
That's what happened.
Yes. But then after that happens, the coach sends you up again. And while you're at your next bat, you hold up the sign that says, "Uh-oh," and you get hit in the face with a baseball. Because that's what that press conference was. It was unbelievably hard to watch. And the fact that it followed like a pretty decent win over the best team in the Canadian North Division, that the only takeaway anyone wants to talk about are the quotes from GM Jim Benning. That's an accomplishment. Like I was literally a whole thing where we were going to talk about the Canucks and the Leafs, and we're going to get into that. But the big thing we're going to rush straight to this press conference because there is so much to digest and get into. So
I was literally going to say that I don't think anybody frankly remember after today. I would be shocked if people actually remembered, oh yeah, there was a game last night that happened.
Yeah,
or that it wasn't like that. Oh, that Canucks Leafs game, that was 2 weeks ago, right? Like that was like, it seems like that long ago. That it just doesn't even matter after what happened today. You and I both listened to the entire thing or watched the entire thing.
Yeah. And
again, this is supposed, like, you knew this was probably going to be a little bit of a disaster. It was more just a matter of how bad, how little damage could you walk out of this presser doing.
Yes.
And frankly, it got kind of lined up for him. Like it was lined up to actually come out relatively unscathed. They'd won. B, the Canadians had fired a coach like a week ago.
Yep.
C, the Flames fired a coach last night, and we'll talk about that
24
later.
hours ago, yeah.
Not even 24 hours ago, like half a day.
Yeah, it was like 12 hours or something. Yeah, it was nuts.
In favor of a retread coach. So, as far as the other Canadian teams are doing, and are concerned, and the other teams in your division are concerned, they have lined you up quite nicely to be like, I mean, this whole place is a disaster. Like, tell me about, like, you're on to talk about us. Look at all these things going on, right? It was lined up relatively to kind of, if you're the PR people and management, it was lined up really well for you to basically shrug it all off. And somehow they did that in the worst way possible. And just completely just self-destructed. You watched a franchise self-destruct.
You really did.
In an interview. It was I'm frankly at a loss. Like, I'm watching this, I'm just like, my mouth's just wide open, like, I cannot believe what's happening here.
Usually, like, in a press conference of any kind of hockey person, there isn't usually much to take away from it. Usually it's pretty standard hockey quotes that you hear all the time. There's nothing really it's usually pretty standard fare. You might get like a notable quote.
Whatever the management comparison is to pucks in deep. That's usually what you
exactly. Get. But this was every answer to a question was bad and reflected poorly on ownership, on the management group, kind of the players too. Like, it was just like, how do you bury yourself and your entire team, ownership and organization in a single hour-long interview? It was amazing. Yeah. It was truly amazing. Like you said, like, mouth agape off the first question. That's an accomplishment where, I mean, I'm gonna just a little caveat here. We critique the way that we critique a lot of the ways that Jim answered his questions. Maybe he's not good as a public speaker. Maybe he has, like, I don't know, like a speech impediment he's hiring. Maybe he's, I don't know, like, just really uncomfortable or has like anxiety or like nerves or something in front of crowds.
It's not for everyone.
That's what it is. It's not for everyone. Speaking for, like, really hardball questions. Like that's the one kudos you can give to him, is like, these are hard questions you have to answer in front of a lot of people that are going to scrutinize everything you say. So it's tough. At the same time, he answered them with like a prepared statement right off the bat that had been clearly pre-written for him by PR or the ownership group or whatever, because typically he has a dialect and a method of speaking that you can tell when he's off the cuff versus when he's reading something prepared. And basically off the first question, which was kind of just like why are things so tough, he immediately rattled off every excuse in the entire book for why the team sucks, and not a single one of them was internal factors. It was all external issues that are currently affecting every single team in the NHL, even the ones that are succeeding above expectations.
Yeah.
It was bad.
It was such a mess. Like, I get that, yes, COVID has affected a lot of decisions for a lot of people, but it's no excuse for what we've seen here. It's zero excuse for what we've seen here. And for Benning to literally come out just swinging right for the fence on, it's everyone's fault but mine.
Yeah. I didn't do it.
Is ridiculous. It's completely ridiculous. He talked about no exhibition games. Every team had no exhibition games, and frankly, those games have very little view into how the team's going to do when the regular season starts. Yep. And so I don't see why the problem is there. There's talks about little practice time during games. Again, everybody has a condensed schedule. I get that yours is a little harder to start out of the gate with, but again, this is nothing that's specific to your situation that you're dealing with. Yeah. And yet here we are talking about this like it's entirely to blame and we should absolve them of all problems because this has happened.
Couldn't see it coming.
And even the whole the cap would have been higher had COVID not happened by $3 million. That's it. One Luongo cap recapture penalty, basically.
That's
it. That's all the difference it would have made. It wasn't going to shoot up some crazy amount that would have derailed all of your crazy plans. No, you just decided you just decided to make poor decisions. And here we are paying for it and watching this mess unfold. And yet this is the start of it. This is just the beginning, like the first 5 minutes.
If we went beat by beat, like
we would be
for days, because it, like, right off the opening statement, it gets worse and worse and worse. You're watching a train wreck unfold, and it is so bad. Like, for those that don't know too, this was Jim's first press conference that he had done since he spoke with Ben Kuzma of the province, and that's when the very infamous "we ran out of time" comment came out of.
Yeah, and first media availability period. I think I don't think he's done an interview or anything since. Just it was literally requests.
It was literally an issue heading into this week where, like, guys like Jeff Pat and I think Rick Dollywall and maybe Trance or someone else were
multiple people
enough were like, everyone's putting in requests for the GM for comments and getting nothing. And then eventually Patrick Johnson, who is the head of the local Hockey Writers Association in BC or in the Pacific, basically put in a request on behalf of everyone saying, no, you guys need to actually do something. And that's what was in this press conference. And one of I think the second question or something, like, someone even asked about, like, we ran out of time question.
That was Drance. That was a great question.
Okay. Yeah. So there's it's like maybe like fifth question or something like that. But someone asked him, like, Drance asked him about that. And he said the "we ran out of time" question or comment was oversimplified. And I'll get you.
I forgot about that. That was so bad.
I'll get your opinion on this, but
oh my god.
After watching this entire press conference unfold, can you imagine how much more complex that statement could have been outside of literally "we ran out of time"? Because he's not a very complex speaker. He speaks very succinctly about what issues he's trying to get across. I highly doubt it could be possibly more complex than "we ran out of time." What else would you say?
And also, I don't know how Ben Kuzma got a hold of him for that article. I assume it was either text or not text, probably.
Well,
email.
According to Patrick Johnson, apparently Jim gives out his phone number to the established media guys at the start of the season, because his philosophy is he doesn't want rumors bandied about. He wants his story to come directly from him to the press. And
which is not a bad setup, frankly.
It's a completely fine way to go about your business, and respect for wanting to get your opinion out directly to the writers instead of a bunch of he said, she said bullshit.
Right.
And then it obviously backfired because I'm assuming whatever conversation he and Kuz were having, it resulted in about as bad of a quote as you could possibly have for a GM.
It's a direct quote. I don't know. Yeah. The mistake for him was he should have said, okay, I'll think on those questions. I will get back to you with an email. I'll email the answers to all your questions or something.
Yeah.
He could have he didn't have to sit there and answer them right away on the phone. So for him to go out and say, oh, that's been oversimplified. You're the one who oversimplified it. No one else did. He quoted you directly. He's not... Kuzma didn't do you dirty and just cut out snippets. No, he's
that's
directly quoting everything you told him. That is on you.
It isn't like he came out, or Benning didn't come out and say Kuzma's quote was a lie or wasn't factual. He just said he oversimplified something. So it's based on his earlier statement too, where he blames all these external factors. Is that what he considers oversimplifying the "we ran out of time" thing? Is that he didn't include the caveat of there's a thing called COVID?
Is that an external error?
That's what I mean.
We ran out of time. Is that an external error?
Is he saying all the external factors that led to him running out of time are what complicates him running out of time, instead of the simplification that Kuz made out of it.
Look, guys, our phone plan isn't good. I cut out midway through. I said something far more eloquent when the phone cut out. Yeah. And, it's not his fault, but it's also not mine. So, frankly, you should go to, who is it? Rogers? Oh, damn it. Oh, damn it. I just spoke bad about the sponsor. Oh, no. That's might as well have been what it was. Obviously we could go into this bit by bit, and we probably will go into most of it, but I wanted to just straight up ask you right now, out of all the things that he said today, out of all the question responses that were the most just downright shocking to you, which is the one that stuck out?
Man, I think the "we live day to day" comment is gonna haunt me till this regime is gone and it's a new team. That or the "we work day to day" with Francesco Aquilini. That is horrifying. But I don't know. Do you want to recap the Leafs game first and then get into it, or do you want to just keep?
We're already kind of into it. We should just keep going with it. I will say, because here's the thing. Like, I actually. Like I thought about this, like, what was the one that really just, like, completely set me off? Like, just set me off the minute he said it. Daniel Wagner asked a fantastic question about how, right off the bat, he asked, what did this team, you said when you started that you expected this team to be competitive by about 4 years. Now it's year 7. Where do you see this team from now? And Jim said, I believe, like, we can be competitive in about 2 more years. If I'm going to try it, I'll pull the question up. I definitely have it somewhere. It was something just so ridiculous where I'm just, like, he says, it'll be 2 more years. And immediately, like, I'm just sitting there thinking, like, so 9 years. You're saying for you to make this team competitive, you're saying right now that it took.
Or you expect the fans to be patient for 9 years.
You expect them to wait.
Able to compete with elite teams, which was the question. And it's like,
I was shocked. Like, I'm literally sitting there like, I'm at a loss for words on this particular quote right here. Because you actually expect everyone to sit here and wait for you and, like, wait another 2 years after 7. We've been through 7 of this.
After 7
crap.
And 1 playoff,
one good year,
actually meaningful.
1 good year, 1 year right at the beginning that was mostly a Mike Gillis team that you kind of retooled. You get some points for it, but still you only got into the first round. It was kind of a wash. Whatever. It's good.
You got embarrassed by Michael Furland, basically.
It was something.
The team on his back.
Who you then obsessed about for the rest of your time, and then signed, and now he's injured the whole time. I mean. Oh my God, this whole team can be traced back to so many different decisions. But I'm just sitting there thinking, like, if your ownership, if you listen to that, how on earth, in good conscience, can you let this guy not even, like, forget the fact that we have the 2 biggest contracts, frankly, in franchise history, possibly, like, outside of, the Sedins and Luongo coming up? Coming up to be renegotiated. Forget that absolutely should not be able to touch that with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah.
You also just want him to even go into the trade deadline and make choices that will directly impact whoever is in charge next? Are you insane? Like, this is ridiculous. Like, I cannot sit here. I cannot honestly believe that I'm being told, oh, you need to be more patient, and because it takes nearly a decade for a team to get good, even though there are multiple examples of why that's not true. And there are lots of teams that have gotten much better in that time. There was the other one where he said something about how, all the other teams in the Canadian division have passed us in development. You had years on them. Ottawa went to a conference final while you were rebuilding, and now they're almost as good as you, and tore the whole thing down in that time.
Completely.
Calgary has been mediocre the entire time, and somehow has managed to keep decent for longer than you have. Edmonton is a little bit of a different story. They have been bad for a very long time, but they at least got Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl out of it.
Yeah.
You
They
never
got something
any.
out of being completely dog
They
shit
got something.
years.
We got Pettersson and Hughes, but again, those are all, even in those cases, they kind of cancel out because they're all pieces that you absolutely should 100% hit on the whole time. And also, when the Oilers were as bad as they weren't competing. They were bad. The Canucks were trying to compete and ended up being that bad anyway. So I don't know what, like, it's so frustrating. Like, I'm so frustrated by watching this just going around in circles and expecting us, like, it's on you for not being patient enough. I'm sorry. I've sat through enough garbage hockey to last me a lifetime. I don't want to see this turn into a Sabres situation where they're just terrible for so long, partially because there's just there's an inherent issue. There's like a toxic issue somewhere in there. The Canucks could very easily turn into that. They haven't got there yet, but they're getting close. It doesn't take much to turn this into a mess where a winning culture is no longer accepted. And this is what I'm watching. I'm watching a team that is so bad not only refuses to own up to any of their own mistakes, of which there are plenty, and you could fill a book.
It's a long list.
They're also asking me to be more patient with them, even though I have given them, and I mean all of us have given them ample time. We have given them more than ample time for them to put together a winner, and they're sitting here telling us why we need to wait 2 more? Get the hell out of here. Get out. Like, I don't need this. This is... Why? Why am I wasting my time? Like, why am I wasting my time with this franchise when I could be going off and doing so many more things that don't drive me bananas? Like, I'm at a loss. Like, I can't believe it. Like, that pissed me off on such a level. As you can tell right now, I'm getting steamed, and I don't know. I'm done.
It's hard to wrap, like, when you're asking me, like, what's the worst, like, quote from the day, the fact that there's like 9 you could pick out in an hour-long press conference,
it's so telling.
That's so telling. Just the lack of forethought, proactivity, long-term outlook, philosophy as an organization. Like, there's such a lack of just brain power that when you want to dive into a single quote, you can't. Like you just did right now. You wanted to talk about the one quote, and you can't, because there's so many threads tied into that one quote that clearly just defines how this guy looks at running an NHL operation, and how we as fans and critics of this team, how we know already by now after 7 years that their philosophy doesn't work. The fact that he comes out, so like the joke always was Botchford, who is probably up high right now laughing his goddamn ass off. I think
what we wouldn't give to text him and just be like, you watching this, right?
Yeah, he is up there right now laughing. If you listen closely, you can hear him howling at the fact that the no plan was basically cemented by Jim with that "we live day to day" comment when being asked about the trade deadline. And it's frustrating, like you're doing right now. You're throwing your hands up and you're just like, why do I follow this team? Because he's giving you all the reasons why it's so hard to follow this team. How many years? Even the most like diehard of Canucks fans are like wanting like a long-term outlook and a better like assurance of the future with their plans for drafting and acquiring assets and being proactive with like expiring assets that they have. And then you have him basically spending like a good chunk of his press conference saying, oh, I'm going to talk to the agent of Tanner Pearson, and I'm going to really try to get him re-signed and see what he wants to do before the trade deadline. But until then, we're just going to take things day by day. And that is horrible. Unacceptable. That is so fucking bad. Like, you have Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes, 2 guys who are probably going to combine for the biggest, most expensive, and most valuable contracts in Canucks history, by the time they are done, these are two cornerstone pieces to your organization that you need to lock up to long-term deals. You cannot afford to bridge them because they are going to get better. And he's prioritizing a guy with 3 points in his last 16 fucking games, approaching a trade deadline when he might be one of the few guys who can actually fetch a return. It is unacceptable that he is basically saying publicly, like, the guy who just said he ran out of time on Toffoli is saying, be patient for another 2 years while I figure out how to re-sign these marginal players, and continue to prioritize guys that don't actually move the needle over the star assets of this team for now and in the future. So don't fucking tell me at the end of your press conference that you've got time to sign Pettersson and Hughes.
Yeah.
We can work on Tanner Pearson. You had the longest window in history of free agency to sign Tyler Toffoli, and you gave up considerable assets to acquire him in an all-in move. So don't tell me that you have time for Hughes and Pettersson when you're going to go out of your way to spend cap that should be going to them on a guy that will be useless to you in 2 or 3 years.
It's frankly even more damning than that, because it's not even just like it's not even just that they had the longest off season ever to sign Toffoli and everything.
They had 2 off seasons practically.
You had 5 years. You had 7 years. You had 7 years to plan ahead and not be in this situation where you're so smashed up against the cap that you need to trade a bunch of things out to try and make this. You could have had that room all ready to go. The Oilers sucked for a bunch of time, but you know what they did with it? They didn't waste money on a bunch of hacks, like a bunch of money on ridiculous depth guys, and left room to give Connor McDavid $10 million a year, 12 million, 20%, the max contract.
Is $9 million.
A max contract.
They left enough to assign the money needed to guys on absolute long-term deals.
Right. And they didn't, because they knew, hey, we're going to need this in a few years. Instead of just being like, hey, let's give $6 million to Tyler Myers and hope that it doesn't bite us in the ass. And hey, look at that. It turned out badly. Like, what did you expect? And for any of you who are like maybe still on the fence about what's going on here, like if you're still on the fence about blaming management, let's put it this way. If your leader of government, if your president or prime minister was looking at you and was like, after 2 terms or like late into their 2nd term, and was like, and all of those campaign promises they made you at the very beginning on the campaign trail when you voted them into office, if they said, oh, we need 2 more years to finish these off to make this happen, after already you have given them 7, you're probably not going to vote for them again, or vote for whoever, or vote for their planned predecessor, because you don't trust them to get anything done. They're not going to do nothing's going to change. We're just going to keep running around in circles and hoping things get better. Yeah. This is so frustrating. The whole day by day, we live day by day, which is completely ridiculous.
And it just flies in the face of everything you want to see from a process, right? Like you
need to have a plan, and
like how can you
There's no plan.
How can you say you don't, like, you basically admit, like, we don't have a plan, we just kind of plan based on what happens on a day.
Play it by ear. What a colossal joke.
It just basically like answers all the questions you had about previous years, and it's so unacceptable to be like, you need to be patient for the next 2 years, when it's like, well, you know what aren't patient moves? Signing 31-year-olds to 4-year and 3-year contracts, signing guys with massive concussion issues to 3 to 4 year deals with multi-million-dollar figures attached to them. That isn't long-term planning. Like, you can't tell me now,
especially when you consider that they expected him to Michael Furlan to be one of their first line winger with Pettersson.
Exactly.
Never forget, people. Furlan played with Pettersson and Besser in the first 2 games on the first line until they smartly put JT Miller there instead. That was the correct call.
That was the plan. And it's like, you can't now say in today's press conference that, oh, it'll be 2 years before we can compete with elite players and you need to be patient, when it's like, no, every move in the past few off seasons were let's win now moves. Like, are you trying to tell me that your living day by day moves include signing 31-year-old Jay Beagle to a 4-year deal because in 3 years from that point, you expect to be competing with elite teams with 35-year-old Jay Beagle? Is that what you're trying to tell me? Is that your long-term planning is like tomorrow? Tomorrow is your long-term plan, is by having Jay Beagle signed by tomorrow. That's a long-term outlook for you. That is mind-boggling to then like walk back all of these moves that he is apparently fine with, because he was asked about the Louis Eriksson deal and he said, oh, you don't win them all.
Oh my God. Again, these are all quotes that I completely forgot. We're so bad.
I know.
I completely forgot about it. Every team has bad contracts.
We're scrolling through all our notes because like we transcribed a bunch of them in our preamble and preparation for today's episode, because you're like, where do you even begin? Like, that's the thing, is like, we kind of broke it down into like different sections, like the excuses, the long-term planning, the long-term outlook and trade deadline implications, the 2021 draft implications. Like, we have all these sections laid out in our notes, but you can't go by them piece by piece because each one ties into the next, and just an overall failure of philosophy, which just you can see it in the YouTube video if you check out our YouTube channel. Our brains are completely melting out of our ears as we try to string together all of these answers together to figure out how can someone run a $1 billion organization, this $1 billion entity where hockey is the most important thing to its city, and just basically fall on your face and say you don't have any issues with your own mistakes that have been abundant in 7 years, and that it's the fans who need to be more patient about this team's success.
Right.
To anyone that obviously, like, I mean, you don't have a reason to, but to anyone that has followed the LA Kings, they had their dynasty years, and I use air quotes because they only won 2 cups. But I mean that's a modern
day dynasty. Use air quotes.
Right?
Yeah, that's absolutely a modern dynasty. They're much short in a cap era, much shorter. You can't win. You can't win 4 or 5 in a row. It's just not possible.
They won their 2 cups, and then, even though Jonathan Quick put on like a goaltending performance of a lifetime against the Vegas Golden Knights, they lost, and the team still recognized it and sold everything imaginable to acquire picks, and only picks. Their AHL team right now is just the who's who of star center and wing prospects, and they were all drafted in the last 2 to 3 years. 3 years is
fantastic.
The guys that were drafted 3 years ago are like pushing for spots on their NHL team. You have Jarrett Anderson Dolan, Rasmus Kupari. Like, they have made the space through their cap management to get kids in the lineup to prepare for their next dynasty while they still have Anze Kopitar. And you know what? They're probably, at this pace, their long-term outlook makes me think they're going to have 2 cups before the Canucks with this management team are even going to contend for 1, because there's just no long-term thinking. There's none. And then you have teams like the Kings, who have better points percentages, are doing very well in the Pacific Division relative to where people thought they would be. And you have the Canucks, who everyone expected to be like a top 4 team in the very weak and shallow Canadian division. Underperforming, yes, but they are playing like complete shit because they are running a defensive core that is a bunch of 30-year-olds who can't skate anymore, and Quinn Hughes. They're running a bottom 6 that can't score and can't skate for shit, and they all cost all of the money. And they're stuck with them for several years from now. And the GM who's put that together is talking about adding more to that bottom 6 in Tanner Pearson, and not acquiring picks because he doesn't understand how much a draft pick is going to be worth at this year's fucking draft. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. He's asked the question. How much do you think a fucking draft pick is going to be worth at this year's deadline? And
You've
the guy
said it before.
said, I have no idea.
Yeah.
It's like, how can you say this? You're the draft guru guy. You were hired by this ownership group because your prowess as a draft scout. And you're saying, I've been speaking to GMs all fucking season to try and get rid of Dumpster Virtanen and his terrible deal. And you don't know what the value of a pick is heading into this draft? What are you talking about? Are you not talking about acquiring picks? You're talking about acquiring other dumpster players?
Literally, yeah, and literally everything he says is so damning. Like the trade deadline thing where it's like, we're going to wait a couple weeks to figure out what we're going to do at the trade deadline, which is monumentally stupid because your players already have very low value. The only thing you had on the only thing selling aspect you have on your side right now is time because you're already bad and you're in before all the other teams realize they're not going to make it and start selling their much better players for much more reasonable prices.
Yeah.
And they're saying, we're going to wait it out. No, don't wait it out. We've already said 1,000 times. This division is such a gong show. You could probably sell off all your assets right now and maybe kind of still make the playoffs because of what a mess this is. But it is absolutely possible that you do that. And yet they're waiting to see, wait for some magic, restart for this entire team. We're 20, six damn games in? Or we're 20, I forget. We're 28 or something. Some ridiculous amount.
Oh yeah, that was the other thing in the
more
press
than enough
conference.
time.
He didn't know how many games were left in the season.
I mean, to be fair, 26. To be fair, most of us don't. I would argue that one's fine.
You and I work full-time jobs, and we aren't GMs of a fucking hockey organization. You should know how many goddamn games are left.
That's a little true, but also this year is so weird. I'm willing to give a pass on that one detail.
After that press conference, I won't give any benefits of the doubt. But things.
That's also fair. That's true. That's also true.
I have 3 things based on the whole trade deadline thing and waiting and seeing. Okay. 1, he says we live day by day. Okay. We get that. 2, he says he's prioritizing Tanner Pearson and seeing if they can re-sign him before the trade deadline. So that's the priorities list. And then
the one question I have there is, are they trying to up his trade value? I know your answer is probably no, because
I doubt it. I don't think
this group has shown us that they're not good at
no way.
They're not good at the savvy salesman bit, which is where you say, oh, this guy, we love him so much, we couldn't possibly part with him, and that's how they get the price to rise on him in the market. You know what? You're right. I realize that's a dumb question. As soon as I ask it, he's not nuanced enough to do that. Of course, he's actually talking about keeping Tanner Pearson and giving him more money instead of trading him. I don't know why I asked that dumb question.
Yeah,
you know what?
That was very dumb of you. But that
was very naive of me. On
that note, I'll just throw another thing on there. The other thing is this team does such a terrible job in the PR side of things that they always tell players or their agents basically how in they are on re-signing someone. So they just hand all the leverage to them. They spent the entire summer talking about how important Jalen Chatfield was to their next year or their next season for 6 months. And then when it finally came to actually signing him as an RFA with arbitration rights, he said, I'm holding out for a better deal or I'm going to go play for the KHL. This is the lack of thinking. They just we're going to sign Tanner Pearson. We really want him back. And we're going to hand him and his agent all the leverage because now they know we want him back.
If you want to do that with Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes, that's fine.
Yeah,
that's okay.
Because they're still
you already know they're going to get all the money in the world.
You
can be very easy on them and very easy about that. But the marginal players. Yeah. I get that, loyalty to your players is nice. Don't give them the damn leverage.
Loyalty does not win you Stanley Cups. I'm sorry, it doesn't. Look at the Lightning. How many draft picks did they give up on in 2 years? Not even to try.
Well, that's not loyalty. That's draft picks. That's
no, but it's still loyalty in a sense. You sign them to an ELC. You're committing to them.
Yeah,
and you're
loyalty to the players. Yeah.
So they basically just they're committing to these guys that they've already invested in time, the sunk cost fallacy. We spent 300 games with Virtanen, can't get rid of him now.
And what's more, you're committing to guys who, as of right now, are not making your team improve. Like, they're not improve. Like what you're like. Even if he was doing all that he could, like even if Tanner Pearson was scoring at a great rate or something, like you're still saying, well, okay, we're also still looking at a team that's fifth in the entire division and saying, yeah, we're gonna re-sign all these guys. We're good as is. They're gonna get better. No, they're not. These are all older guys. They're not going to get better. They're going to probably, if anything, regress. At least for the veteran guys. They're not good. If this is what you want your ceiling to be, then sure, go ahead and re-sign them. If you want to be fifth, if you want to finish fifth every year, go ahead, re-sign everybody. Why do I care? See if I care. Like,
I'm just realizing that was another one of the dumb quotes of his when he's like, we're a step behind all the other teams because they have older cores. He's like,
did he actually say that?
He's like the elite.
Wait, he said that they also have
Canadian teams are all older players.
He said they were both ahead of us development wise, and said that they're older.
Yes, he said that they're his young team is competing against the older players of the league, and it's like, dude, every single core in the NHL's Canadian division are children. Or kids, like the same ages as your core of Elias Pettersson, Bo Horvat, Miller, Hughes, Besser. Like they're all the same age group. The oldest core.
Besser's going into contract number 3. By the time that Jim Benning says he wants to be out, and this is shout out to Samantha CP for putting this out there, for enlightening everyone to that fact. If we wait another 2 years, by that point, Besser will be done his second contract and on to number 3.
Miller will be on too. They won't be able to afford him.
They won't be able to afford Miller. Horvat's got to be coming up on it pretty close too, wouldn't he? He's got to be coming up on that.
As Miller. Oh yeah, and you know who else is up at that time too? We talked about this in our last episode. The other person up at that time is Niels Hoglander.
And what do you like? You really like this? It's such a mess. This is a whole mess. Kids, if you're listening to this, if any kids are listening to this, if you're thinking to yourself, I would like to be an NHL GM someday. You know what? No matter what your math skills are, no matter your English grade, no matter what, you go out and do it. Because you could do it. It is possible. Well, actually, it's all about knowing people. It's all about you. There is no actual skill involved with this job. Like,
it is actually not.
Oh, but Peter Chiarelli went to Harvard. Yeah, and he built the worst team ever. Like, don't give me that load. There is no skill involved with this. I could do it. I absolutely could.
If you actually want to be a GM, you have to start out by A, being a white hockey player, or B, becoming a player agent first and going to a Harvard or Ivy League school, and then, being a player agent for some time. But otherwise, you don't have a chance. You have to know somebody and have to be white enough and old enough to basically get the job, or you have to be in stats, and hopefully the next wave of GMs
but you know what, this
are like forward thinking.
That is probably,
but it's not
that is
happen.
Almost assuredly true. But I will say that this is a podcast where we send out positive vibes, which is, kids, if you want to be a GM,
I'm fucking
you can
done with
do
positive
it.
Vibes, dude.
I believe in
I don't have time for
I believe in the next
anymore.
generation that you could do a way better job than Jim Benning has done. This is like, what are we doing here? Like,
I don't have any time for that argument. No,
we sit
positive
here.
Vibes are dead. They died on March 5th, 2021 at 9 a.m. when the GM said that the Eriksson deal was okay, and just give me 2 more years to figure this job out.
Okay, but even on this show, we've said before that the Eriksson contract was a little bit like, it was still kind of hard to see what a fall that was. We've said that on the show before, that it was like that, even that, like, okay, if they had asked him about the Myers contract and said, did you regret that? And then he gave that answer, then I would say, okay, shut up. You have no clue what you're talking about. But with the Eriksson contract, it went extra poorly. Like,
Based on some of the Twitter things I read, I think a lot of people, like the media guys, wanted to follow up that question by saying, not even just the Eriksson contract, but like, how can you justify signing, Beagle or Myers to these long-term multi-million-dollar deals with like no movement clauses and no trade clauses? If you expected, to need another 2 years, or how can you justify Eriksson's deal and say we don't always hit, and then you sign these contracts just a few years later when you're going to need 2 extra years after? So which is it? It doesn't make any sense. And like I just remembered my other point that I was making about the trade deadline thing. he also admitted that he knew that the team had to improve internally and couldn't look externally. He said the only way they were ever going to get better this season because of quarantine restrictions is they would need to improve through their own players in the system currently. So why is he talking like the trade deadline is going to be we're going to acquire players instead of picks, even though he's also in that same like breath admitting like it's not going to work because of the quarantine and
if there was one thing he said,
just breaks your brain.
If there's one thing he said that was very true in this entire conference, it was that when he said they're living day to day. Yeah, I believe it.
He meant it, baby.
You know what? Like maybe he's even actually being nice about it. I would say it's more like it's just a management group full of goldfish where they're just living every 15 seconds.
Just hitting their heads into the bowl.
Like they hit the bowl and they're like, what was I thinking about again? Oh, yeah. That's right. Like and they
right. Tanner Pearson, that's who I wanted to re-sign.
Yeah, it's it's just goldfish
ultimate
logic
goldfish
here.
Brain for
where they're
sure.
all just like they complete every 15 seconds it just resets and they forget what they were doing. And this is
100%.
I 100% believe them when they say they're living day to day. There is so clearly there is no plan. There is absolutely no plan. No. They even said like with Pettersson and Hughes contracts that they're planning to not talk about it until after the trade deadline, which is monumental. That's a
fireable offense.
Like
you ask me. Like that's honestly a fireable offense.
I'm laughing so hard because I have no clue what else to react to this. Like why would you wait for this arbitrary number? Yeah. How is that going to fix anything? Like I get that you have to wait to push some money out, but still, just have those conversations now. It's very much the truth of, hey, we don't want to get distracted by all the other things because again, apparently you cannot put you're consciously cannot.
I know I'm
laughing so hard.
Your brain breaks when you start talking about it because it's like, how can you? It speaks to the fact that they can't multitask. Like they say to themselves, before the trade deadline, we're gonna improve internally. We're going to also look externally because we can't look internally. And we're going to not trade draft picks because we don't know the value, but a draft pick is something that would be good if we won. We're going to re-sign Pearson to another deal, but
not until after the trade deadline when we figured it out.
The trade
but
deadline,
also not until after. But we also can't figure out the trade deadline until we've decided what to do with Tanner Pearson.
Yeah, like
just, oh my god, like I can literally feel my brain just melting.
Yeah, because
in this whole mess, like
here's you and I, like just two like schlubs talking.
Guys, if you don't watch the YouTube video version of this, I highly encourage you. Check it out, Lise. You can watch the second their heart breaks in half
and like pulling our cheeks down because we can't believe it. But like, how can you? It is a terrible offense because it is like, how can you honestly say you are going to wait to sign Pettersson and Hughes to their mega deals, and in the same breath be like, we're going to sign Pearson? Because it's like, so does that mean you're prioritizing like lesser deals still over your stars? Because like, what happens if Pearson comes in at the same dollar value that Tyler Toffoli comes in at? So then are you saying Tanner Pearson was more valuable to you than Tyler Toffoli and Pettersson and Hughes on a better deal? Like it. I mean, I almost think we should stop talking about the presser, dude, because I think we're just in a circle in the exact same arguments of how it just like makes no sense. And it's just the circular logic that we are going through is somehow not the circular logic they are going through as a management regime, which is shocking because how can you say you live day to day and then basically answer a bunch of questions that prove you're living in a very circular world where nothing actually explains the other, but you're in charge of the success, both financially and on ice, for $1 billion company? It doesn't make any sense. Yeah. And honestly, we're gonna. Imagine
any tech mogul talking about how, oh yes, there's a problem with this phone, but we're not gonna fix it until we fix this other thing, which is broken because the first thing was broken. Like this is exactly what we're going into, and I mean, hope. Like there was some hope at the beginning of the year, even with all the stuff they lost out on,
Yeah.
it's drying out fast. If not already gone. Like, what do you expect to do? There's the whole Jake Virtanen situation, where they could have done something, but also weren't going to because management's not going to give them more money.
Nope.
And so he
ran
stays. Out. And that is why today we're able to give him the Infinity Gauntlet for the best the best game. And as we transition to the game situation, because again, the game
there was
good.
A game last night.
There was a game last night, and it went well. And Jake Virtanen scored not one but two impressive goals, like incredibly nice goals.
I was shocked that was apparently his first 2-goal game.
Oh yeah, me too.
Like that actually blew my brain a bit because I was like, "There's no way that was his first 2-goal game."
It shocked me, but also like it also sounded totally par for the course. Like
for sure,
it was one of those, like, oh, that's surprising. But then when you actually think about it for a second, you're like, oh, never mind. Like, actually, no, that sounds about right. But the 2 goals he scored were incredible efforts. Like the first one,
the second one was about as lucky as it gets. That was about as Jake Virtanen of a goal as it gets. Like
it's
lucky,
down the
right side and then just like somehow roofing it over Hutchinson's shoulder. That's as Jake of a goal as you get. And
it's
like
lucky, but it's also a nice shot. Like that's also a shot that 99% of the league isn't going to get generally. Like,
Wyatt in the Armies put it perfectly when he said that's the kind of shot that will convince Jake that he doesn't need to ever cut to the net as a power forward. And he's right. Like he'll get that kind of greasy goal from the corners and think, I've got such a good shot, I'm never going to drive to the net because I can just do it this way, and it'll be
that is so true. That's so true. Especially that's disappointingly true, especially when you consider that like that first goal was greasy and great. Like that's a great goal. He cut hard to the net, pushed the Leafs defender out of his own way, flipped the puck, kept moving with it as Michael Hutchinson falls over and the rest of the Leafs defense has no clue what to do and dribbles into the net. That's a great goal. That's a great, hard-working, gutsy goal. Yeah. And then now you look at this, and you look at the situation where, Jake Virtanen might not ever do that again because he got the second goal that was so nice. Yeah. That it's like, this is my skill. I'm that good. I can do this. I'm first line.
I am Steven Stamkos. I don't have to try ever again.
I'm elite talent. Yeah. But you know what? For what it's worth, he got 2 goals and he looked good doing it. And he called out those darn Twitter warriors, which he certainly shut us up.
Man, that's so embarrassing.
Well, I guess I'm not technically a Twitter warrior. I'm pretty low key. You are though. That's
I am. I'm a huge Twitter warrior.
Absolutely.
I have been for like my entire life. So
cancel Cody. Cody needs to be canceled. He really.
Yeah, I took a lot of offense to Jake and me.
You know what? I will say that's I will say my respect for him for doing the Twitter warrior bit. Like he gained some respect for me. If you want to call out, like in the sense of like, if you want to call people out like while showing it on the ice, hell yeah, go ahead, be a heel. Like that's a very heel, like wrestling heel move. To be like, look, all these fans, they thought against me and I showed them. Like, that's actually, I actually give him credit for showmanship on that. Like, I'll give him some credit for the showmanship.
Yeah, fair enough.
And, like, whether or not, like, because, and at the end of the day, like, when we're complaining about a player, we're not actually really complaining about that guy so much as we are complaining about management for making the choices they do with that certain player. Correct. So if a player wants to show up and take offense to that stuff and then show it on the ice, like, hell yeah, go ahead. I will not fault you for that. Go for it. Absolutely. And he absolutely led them against a Leafs team that they should not have beat. Now, obviously, there's a couple asterisks here. Number one being that, yes, they beat the Leafs, but they beat the Leafs playing their third-string goalie in Michael Hutchinson because both Freddie Anderson...
On the strength of a back-to-back, too.
Right. Freddie Anderson is hurt, and I also believe Jack Campbell is hurt. They're both out right now, unless I'm mistaken. But either way, because they have not played. It's just they just had Hutchinson. He's their only goalie as far as I can tell. Like, that is a bit of an asterisk that can't be ignored. Yeah. But also, the Canucks were without Elias Pettersson, which is, like, Shocking. They did quite well. They look pretty
they look
darn
very
well
good without him, which makes me think he's the problem, and they should probably just trade him while they still can.
Oh, you know what? I would laugh much harder at that if
we didn't listen to that press conference.
If I didn't listen to that press conference and believe kind of deep, like it's deep down there, but there is a small part of me that's like, oh, they would look at that.
They would do that.
They would do that. Like
if they were given the chance, they
minor.
might actually do it. And you're kind of like, ha ha ha, please don't do it.
Please don't. Like that. Yeah, it's down there. It's deep down there in the dark crevices of my brain, but it's there. I definitely believe that management would be like, we can trade Pettersson for all we want here.
Yeah, we can trade him for what?
Yeah. Which would be, like, I don't need to tell you how monumentally dumb that would be, but nonetheless, they won and they look good doing it. Cody, how did you feel about the team's effort last night?
I thought they looked fine against a team that was coming in very tired. Demko impressed.
They played two, but they'd had a night off. They had a night off. Like, they weren't coming in on a back-to-back necessarily.
Wasn't Toronto coming off a back-to-back?
Well, 2 days ago? I don't know. Let me look at their schedule. You talk while I pull up their schedule here.
Yeah, I don't know. It was even if it wasn't a back-to-back, like, I don't know. I don't think Toronto necessarily played that great, to be completely honest.
You are right. They did come in off the back-to-back. That's more.
Yeah, so, like, I don't know. Like, they look good. I mean, that's the caveat there is, okay, they looked really good without Elias Pettersson, and they needed, like, something like that, because how often have we complained that this team is a one-line team or a one-center team? But at the same time, yeah, it's Michael Hutchinson, and Austin Matthews hasn't really looked the same since he came back from his little stint on IR. So it's a bit odd. But yeah, it was fine. The most you can take away from that game was Mark Michaelis got his first bit of game action. So kudos to him. And the other bit, well, obviously Jake Virtanen and his 2 goals and finally playing. What
did you think of Michaelis? Like, because obviously he wasn't out there much. Like, he didn't.
Honestly,
do much.
I barely noticed him.
He played 12. Well, actually, he played 12 minutes. That's not.
I barely noticed him. And the only thing that really stood out to me was that the Canucks now have a lineup and a roster that has 3 dudes who are undersized, speedy, and play hard. And all of their jerseys are double-digit numbers that end in 6. So half the time I'll see someone
Hoglander,
Michaelis, and Roussel. Oh my God, I didn't even think of Gaudette, but Gaudette's more lanky and he has the long hair, so he sticks out a bit more.
That's true.
Roussel, Hoglander, and Michaelis are all short, stocky guys that have good speed. They look like they skate kind of similarly. They're feisty. They hit. They battle for loose pucks. So I saw, like, I don't know, one move, and I was like, oh man, like Hoglander, that was a really interesting move. And I was like, oh, it's Michaelis. Which I guess is the best compliment you can give him, is that at one point I thought it was Hoglander.
Nils Hoglander with an umlaut on his jersey now, finally.
Yes, that was the key. Maybe that was the key to all this, and they'll actually go on a streak because he has the umlaut.
Yes.
It might happen. You never know.
I saw some people saying, like, oh, like, RIP to anyone who bought a jersey ahead of time. I'm sure if you... Well, okay, I will say, though, like, it doesn't look like it actually affected the name bar at all. They just add the dots over the existing shape. So I'm darn sure if you took that down to, like, the Canucks store, they would put them on for free. I would be shocked if they tried.
Do it.
If now we did just talk about how management is really closing the purse strings up, so maybe they will charge you $10 just to put some umlauts on your jersey.
They'll charge you $10 per dot. So it's $20
per dot. Oh my God. But you know what? Yeah, Michaelis had the one situation where he got a little bit kind of tied up with where, like, Pierre Engvall, that led to the Engvall goal. Like, when he was cutting to the net, the guy Engvall got around him. He tried to grab him, just couldn't get there in time. A bit of an error, letting him in on the inside that way. But that's a young guy making in his first game, and it happens. Like, I'm not going to give him too much crap for that. It's a tough one. It's a tough one, but it happens, and he's learning. And hopefully he gets a bit more time. Like, hopefully when Pettersson comes back, we do not know what he's dealing with. We believe there's something. It might be a sickness, which is very concerning.
Hopefully it's nothing.
It's not COVID because he's not on the protocol list.
He would have to be on the protocol, yeah.
He'd have to be publicly on the protocol list for that. But so he might. But it is believed to be that he's battling an illness of some kind, which is not good.
And
that's at least what I think Patrick Johnson said. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
But you hope that when Pettersson does come back, that you give Michaelis a chance to stay in for a little bit. I mean, Howrluck's out there right now as well. And he's only getting, he's the only forward getting sub 10 minutes a night right now.
Yeah.
Beagle only got 10, 10:03.
Mm-hmm.
But
and it was probably mostly PK time, but
yeah, and Howrluck's the only one in the single digits. So I would expect to see Michaelis stay in that lineup at least a little bit longer than Howrluck does, or someone else, and you hope he gets an opportunity to kind of try and improve, especially because he's supposed to be a bit of scoring is supposed to be kind of more his bread and butter. I think he's more
his thing is supposed
guy.
to be 5v5 scoring and contributing. I think Drance was all over his 5v5 metrics with Ottawa or whatever it was, and how he was underrated by every team he's been on. But
in that third line is exactly what they need. That's exactly the kind of effect that they absolutely could use playing on the third line right now. So if Michaelis can find himself in a situation where he's able to stick there and to show that he's able to play at this level and stick there, that's huge. That's great for him, and that's great for the lineup for adding a little bit more of a scoring threat.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, I don't know if he's necessarily going to be a game breaker for them. I know Jim is all about the internal promotion to try and get better, but I don't know if Howrluck or Michaelis are pushing the needle enough for the team to go from being a bottom dweller to actually being an elite competitor that is going to be battling for a playoff spot.
I felt like that was understood within I didn't that went without saying. I thought that went without saying. They're not going to move the needle in terms of making this team a playoff team versus not. But down the line, it's going to help. It's going to help. It's going to add some it's the pieces. It's all about adding to the puzzle. And right now, all you need is more pieces to try and get it to fit, to get it to work overall.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is not how a puzzle works, I'm aware. But that's kind of what I'm saying,
it's a double key.
You need to buy the expansion packs to finish it. That's how puzzles work.
Exactly. But other than that, the only other takeaway really for the game was Demko playing out of his mind. Other than that, pretty good. It was a good game. It's what they needed. After two very kind of boring, as far as I'm concerned, games against Winnipeg, I thought it's what they needed. They needed something where they could light the lamp a bit, kind of impress, and that's hey, got it.
Demko was solid. He looked very good. He looked calm. He looked collected. I don't know what much there is left to say on Demko more or less right now, because he's playing like he should. This is Demko coming as advertised. This is exactly what you're going to get out of a starting goaltender. This is a guy who's ready for the extra time and the extra minutes. There was a little bit of concern early in the day. We thought that maybe Holtby was going to start, which sent us all into a bit of set Canucks Twitter ablaze again. But then it turned out that Demko was going to start. That was the right decision. He played very well. Yeah. And I think you're going to and I would be shocked if he didn't get the start again on Saturday. He's playing as a starting goalie should. And right now, you take the wins where you can get them, particularly when it comes to your individual, not in the points category, but in the individual development and efforts. Right now, Demko is turning into an A+, one of the few A+ you can get out of this season. And you're hoping that's what you're going to see at the end of the year, is that he very much proved at least that Markstrom was expendable from a starting goalie standpoint. Whether or not he was expendable from a two goalie setup situation is still not looking so good. Yeah, that's still not looking so good, but at least from a guy who can take starting minutes and not only perform but win you games based on their play, Demko's proven he can. And eventually we'll have to get Quads on the show to talk about it. Quadrelli gave us a shout out.
Our private chat and our DMs. I said Quads is welcome, more than welcome, but I will be away on that episode. You guys can talk all the goalie stuff you want. Maybe I'll hop on the Canucks conversation and talk prospects or something.
Wow.
The
Yeah.
OG Fabes.
We're absolutely gonna get Quads on to just like talk nothing but goalies. Well, it'll just be him and me just talking about how great Demko
It'll
is
be like
for an hour and a half.
It'll be a 5 hour long podcast. Where
We'll
you
just
guys
breaking down every single goalie in the league. That's what it's gonna be.
Yeah, there you go.
Let's go to the tape. Like here's who's the goalie doing really well for Chicago right now? Vennakainen, I think is his name.
Kevin Lankinen.
Lankinen, yeah, that's what I'm thinking of. Lankinen. He's doing I had never heard of this guy, and all of a sudden he's doing really well.
I just said
we
his
could
name
do an
I've
episode.
already forgotten about him.
Yeah, we could do. We absolutely. Don't worry. We're gonna get Quads on for that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? You'd have to stay at least for a bit because we need you to like rein us in when we just start going off on the tangents. Like, okay, like
I would
calm
probably fall
down, you
asleep.
two.
That's the problem.
Wow. Oh, don't act like goaltending is beneath you.
I'm not saying it's beneath me.
You're saying the conversation is beneath your time and
I say
energy.
I'm more valuable than goalie talk.
Wow. Okay.
As are most people.
Okay, so don't put Cody in front of in your GM position. He won't know what he's doing.
I say that as someone who spoke with Michael DiPietro, and he was a doll.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I've heard nothing but good things about
he's very
about
great.
DiPietro.
He's very good.
Yeah, I feel like we can. Yeah, that's pretty much all we wanted to go over on that regard. In terms of Calgary, that's the other thing. This is coming off the heels of Calgary firing Geoff Ward, which let's start right off the bat. Long overdue. Like that was long overdue.
For
that
sure.
team
like,
was way underperforming.
Overdue. It is kind of like it's a bad look on. Like we talk about like Jim having a bad look over like an awkward press conference. Like this is the 5th coach under Treliving in like 5 years.
I'm shocked that he's gotten that long a leash.
Oh, for sure. Like
that's nuts. How I don't know how you can go that long and say, well, you keep hiring the wrong guys. Like what's going on? Yeah. Like I definitely have been. Again, I've said many times before that I think the Flames as built are definitely overrated compared to what people think they're capable of. I don't think I think you're kind of seeing them regress to what they are more or less. But that's on the GM. Why is he on coach number 6 at this point? How has he been given that short a leash? I will give the point of, well, the Bill Peters thing was a bit weird, and that came out of left field.
That was apparently like his guy too, so it's like.
But that came out of left field, like in terms of like you didn't know that whole mess was going to happen then, if you knew at all that it happened. So and I remember giving them credit at the time for not wasting time and actually just getting rid of him, So
because they could have dragged their feet if they really wanted to, and they could have been like, "Oh, we're going to do an internal investigation."
Absolutely,
what it's all about, and they didn't. They were just like, "Nah, let's."
This guy's bad. Let's get rid of him.
This guy sucks. Let's get rid of him.
And so I will give them a wash on that one. But the other, there's been Glenn Gullitson, former Canucks coach. There's been obviously Geoff Ward. You had who else was there before? Bob Hartley was another one. And I can't even go back to who else was there. There's been that many that I've forgotten who's been there in that time frame. But and now they're going back to Darryl Sutter, who is a retread of a guy who was already the coach of the team from 2003, from mid-2003, all the way to 2006, when he was then kicked upstairs and became the general manager for the next 7 years after that, it looks like, up until the Kings thing happened. Until he took the job of the Kings.
He had that moment with the Kings core where they booted him out of the locker room and locked him out.
Yep, near the very end of his tenure.
Near the very end, they were like, "Nah, fuck this. We're tired of being abused by this guy," which he was also accused of.
Oh yeah, there's that whole chestnut where apparently you went. Now maybe I won't give you the Bill Peters credit anymore because you went right back to a guy who's apparently not great.
Yeah, allegedly
doesn't treat his players very well. And look, they needed to make a change. If you wanted to go to Darryl Sutter till the end of the year, I guess okay, maybe it'll help. Who knows? they gave him a 3-year contract out of the gate, which I think is a mistake. I think that's a huge mistake. I get that he won 2 Stanley Cups with the Kings, but that was a long time ago now. That was almost a decade at this point. And also, like, why? What was the point? Why did you need to speed up on this? Why couldn't you have just, like, wait until the end of the year to see how it goes and then address the extension depending on how he does? Like, I don't know the point of giving him the 3-year contract just fresh out of the gate.
It's total old white hockey men shit. You know what I mean? Like, oh, there's this guy that we really liked from our past. Let's give him an opportunity. He has no reason to get the opportunity, but hey, people liked him, right? So let's do it again. Run it back. And here they are, giving him another shot.
to be fair, apparently a lot of Flames fans are thrilled that he's coming back, which I'm like, okay.
Which I can't even fault them really, because it's like, of course they're thrilled because they just had Geoff Ward for the last year and a half, and the team was underperforming like crazy. Yeah, like you'll take anything. I tweeted out, like, given like the current like need to prop up Mike Babcock and like provide, like, give him his redemption arc, even though nobody wants it. And the Ted Nolan story from earlier this year, where he was basically like, I'm pretty sure racism is the only reason I'm not in the NHL. What a layup for the organization to kill 2 birds with 1 stone by having a guy like Ted Nolan hired back in his return and just curry favor with like a market that heavily depends on its indigenous people's support. Like, that's a huge layup of a win. Instead, they just choose generic hockey man because his last name's Sutter and he coached us once.
Yeah.
That's super lame. And especially like given like that they moved on from Bill Peters because of like the accusations of racism, to then sign a guy who was accused of being like a bully and like violent with his players like 2 years prior to the Babcock and Bill Peters things. That's kind of weird to me.
Not to mention also that if there's one thing that a lot of his teams have had in common over the last so many years, it's that they've been very veteran-laden teams that are kind of on the cusp. Like, they've always had the pieces there to be like, say, oh, we're a cup contender. We just need somebody to kind of fit that final piece of the puzzle together. Yeah. And this is a very different situation than that. Like, yes, the Flames have a lot of star quality or big name quality, like with Gaudreau and Monahan and Tkachuk. But in reality, they're a very young team. They're a group mostly made up of younger guys who are still developing, more or less. Like, at least their next core is kind of like that. And especially based on what we know about Darryl Sutter's style of coaching, I am very interested to see how well that meshes with a younger demographic, a younger generation, particularly the kind of generation that is more used to kind of questioning. Like, this is something that I remember was happened on 31 Thoughts last season or a season before. They talked about how players nowadays, how their minds are wired and how we've kind of raised the next generation. This is including us, frankly, like, or at least myself here.
Yeah. Don't let me in that category.
Yep. Old. Yes, you're old. I forgot.
Yeah, I am ancient.
But what we've been very much raised to do is not to just take when somebody says something, you do it. It's much more of you listen to what they have to say, and then you say, well, why do I do it this way? Why would I not? Why? And then you offer your own input and suggestion, which is good. And it creates for it creates for a better working environment, because now you're getting more views on the same idea, on the same concept. Hence why a more diverse working culture is always very good. And that's why right at the top of the show, we talked about Seattle doing that sort of thing and trying to build
doing something very good, which you don't normally see.
Yes, exactly. With Darryl Sutter, you wonder about, is he going to be comfortable when Matthew Tkachuk asks, well, why are we doing a drill this way? Or Johnny Gaudreau asks, why wouldn't I do, instead of doing it this way, why wouldn't I do it this way? They're not obviously, like, they're not being like trying to be like insubordinate. They're just asking questions. They're just they're just curious. And you wonder with a coach who has worked in a very different era with a lot of older players, if that's going to translate well with this group. and we're gonna have to wait and see. It could get worse before it gets better. We're gonna find out.
Yeah, for sure. Other than that, the only other team, or the only other thing about the Flames thing, sorry, is that you have like a guy like Jacob Markstrom too, who is like kind of like a big room guy, and then you have like a Darryl Sutter come in who is known for like kind of demanding his room to come together. So you have to be wondering like what kind of like chemistry that's going to form between the coach and goaltender, like how that like that dynamic will work. This like very old school dude who demands leadership in his locker room, and then a guy like Markstrom who like commands leadership with the way he plays and the way he enters locker rooms, like just how that dynamic's going to work. So like, I don't know, like,
I mean, he had Jonathan Quick for a long time, who is, if you know anything about Quick, he's very loud and very much the kind, a bit, we'll say bombastic kind of got personality.
Mr. Bombastic.
He got like the best goaltending out of his, in the best American goaltender in NHL history out of him. Like,
yeah.
I mean, Sutter's teams have always had decent goaltending, so there is that. Like, Kiprusoff was fantastic. He always got goaltenders to play at their best, which is, maybe this is good for Markstrom. You could see. Like, I mean, Markstrom was playing well already, so
it might be
a boon. It might help him get even better. You never know.
It might be the start of a beautiful friendship.
Yes. And
I believe that's a film reference, but I don't know what one it is.
I'm sure that's multiple films have talked about that.
I feel like it's Prometheus.
And what better friendship to talk about than Cody's friendship with the Utica Comets as we go into the Comets corner, which is where the show flips and I start asking the tough questions. Now it's time for you to answer the tough interview questions.
I ran out of time in this section, and I usually live day to day on the Comets recap, so I might not be able to answer all of them, but I'll try.
I mean, I think you'll be able to for the most part. I mean, right now, I mean, the Comets, like, just technically speaking, they're doing all right. They're 5-2.
They're doing great.
5-1, I should say. They have the second best winning percentage in the North Division, behind only Lee Valley. What do you think? What do you attribute, I guess, right now to like the success they've been having so far early in the season?
That's a good question, to be honest. It's a bit of a mixed bag because at 5v5, they're pretty bad. Like, their leading goal scorer at 5v5 is Jonah Gadjevich, and Jonah Gadjevich can't really skate. So it's very telling that, like, you have a first line that's as loaded as Cole Lind, Sven Berchi, and then prior to their call-ups, it would be Sam Annis. The fact that they weren't scoring at 5v5 and winning in spite of that is pretty impressive. Like, they had shorthanded goals, their power play was clicking pretty good, but 5v5 they've struggled. So I would almost credit their success to like a bottom six that's actually like overperformed, which is pretty typical of Trent Cull teams. He always manages to find depth scoring out of like his ECHL guys and his AHL guys when like no one expects him to. Like Vinny Arsenault had 3 goals in 2 games. He got goals out of Carson Vogt and Nolan Stevens contributing a bunch of Blues prospects. But yeah, it's all kind of in spite of the 5v5 production of the first line, which has struggled to adapt to the skill level, at least in my personal feelings. And the defenses looked really, really good considering it's like a bunch of children.
So if you saw regression, if there was a regression, at least from when it comes down to the fact that they're not scoring super well at 5v5, like how drastically do you think that'll impact their winning right now? Do you think it'll, like, is it going to crater, or is this kind of
I think the winning would actually going to
literally
I think what's going to happen is, so I think the 5v5 production from the first line isn't where it ought to be. And I think the 5v5 production that's being generated whenever Gadjevich is on the ice is going to slip. So what's going to happen is you're going to see way more scoring from Berchi and Lind with whoever they have on their wing that's going to be scoring goals. But then you'll have like a guy like Gadjevich, who's like the only reason that they score at 5v5. He's going to regress because his shooting percentage right now is like 45%. Yeah, like it's like through the roof. So he's going to regress, but everyone else in theory should bump up. Like you have like a kid like Jet Wu who's looked very, very good in a rookie year in fairly decent minutes. He's churning out tons of shot assists, tons of shots on goal, just tons of attempts whenever he's on the ice. He defends very well and prevents shots against, but he just been snake bitten in his shots. He had like 5 chances in their last Wednesday game or whatever it was. Like, it was really impressive for like a kid who like wasn't really drafted because he's like some offensive whiz. It's just like he's a big boy who throws his body and plays really hard. And like eventually his shooting percentage is going to rise and he's going to start getting the points coming his way. I can't imagine he's going to be like a Jalen Chatfield who plays solid defensively but gets 0 offense. Just with the way he plays, the bounces are bound to go his way. It's kind of like Nate Schmidt in that way, except he's not batting pucks into his own net.
Too true. And I did want to ask you about Gadjevich, actually. I wanted to ask you about Gadjevich and as well, I guess to an extent, Cole Lind. They're both leading the team in points right now. And obviously, points aren't everything, especially at the AHL level. It can really differ. It can really change how you play. As far as Gadjevich is concerned, you already mentioned his skating. Do you see him being able to say translate over to even if a regression comes? Do you see him being able to translate over to a guy who could say make his way onto the taxi squad later on in the season potentially, or even into an NHL game?
It's tough to say because I always kind of look back to Zach McEwen's year when he basically left the Canucks no choice but to call him up. In that year, he was skating like his life depended on it. Like, his skating was unbelievable. He would have these 200-foot skates where he would race into the offensive zone for a chance, get on his heels, be the first man back past his defense to defend, and then lead another chance on that same shift in the opposite direction at the same speed and then change off. He would generate tons of power play opportunities as the net front guy, which Gadjevich does too on power play too. But McEwen like earned it based off of his skating and the fact that he had a good two-way play. Gadjevich is more of like an opportunistic scorer who is really good at the net front and batting and rebounds, but his skating is a massive hindrance because he doesn't play a 200-foot game because he can't. The other day when he played against Rochester, he was struggling to keep up with Jack Quinn, who's like a really speedy first-round pick of the Buffalo Sabres, who will probably be a guy that they get into their team and ruin. But the fact that he is like in his 3rd season and he's struggling to keep up with someone that there will be a lot of in the NHL isn't a good look, especially when they're in pretty favorable minutes. He doesn't get a lot of defensive zone faceoffs. He's mostly being deployed in the neutral zone or the offensive zone. So the fact that he's struggling against like guys that he would encounter a lot against NHL bottom sixes doesn't really bode well. And kind of like the consistency with Jake Virtanen, for a guy like Jonah Gadjevich, what you need to see is consistent skating in every single game, not every 3rd shift he has a good back check or every 3rd shift he has a good drive on goal. There's so much more to it that I feel people see, like we said earlier, points aren't everything, but a lot of people will read my game recaps and see Gadjevich has 8 points and immediately assume, oh, he's NHL ready, he's going to be a guy. When that's never been the case. It's always been about compete, hustle, and skating. Lucas Jasek probably has bottom 6 NHL wheels. He could probably slide in effectively for Jay Beagle on the 4th line and penalty kill and provide adequate NHL minutes. But to be that Zach McEwen type who's knocking on the door, you have to have considerable skating. And frankly, a lot of the Canucks guys that, everyone kind of thought were going to be the next wave coming up don't really have it or have displayed it at a consistent level enough that would make them like a sure pick in the NHL.
I guess out of those two camps, where would you put Cole Linden? Because he's kind of a guy who's, he's a former second round pick. Mm-hmm. And who has shown good flashes at the AHL level, and we're still waiting on even the opportunity to see him get his his agent to go and say, well, they should give him a shot, like give him his game to see where he's at, sort of thing. Kind of like what we got with Demko a few years ago. We've gotten with certain players in the past few years. Where how far along is Lind in his development, and when do you see him what do you see him potentially being a guy who could throw in, or is he still kind of a guy that's more or less is a work in progress?
I think he's still a work in progress. I liked what I saw from him at last season's camp to prepare for the playoff bubble. I thought he looked really good in some of the scrimmages and practices that they were televising. But outside of that, he came into this season's camp. He didn't really look in shape. He didn't look good. He looked like he was throwing the puck away. He didn't look fast by any stretch. And then they transitioned him to center, which requires like way more work and way more commitment to a two-way game, which hasn't really been his thing until now. He has games where he displays pretty good defensive chops. He's got good hockey IQ, so he kind of knows where to be when it comes to defending. So he's good in that sense, but he's struggled to put it together. He's prone to giveaways, and he gets caught with his head down way more than you ever want to see a pro hockey player get caught with his head down. This kid gets lit up by hits in the center or in the neutral zone or while on zone entries. He's a zone entry machine, but the dude stares at his feet or at the puck way too much. I think any coach would see him at a practice and be like, buddy, I'm going to blow my whistle every time you're about to get blown up by another team because you would get destroyed. It happens way too much for a guy who's supposed to be like a high flying, offensively minded forward. I mean, I have hopes. Like, there's always a caveat with the way I analyze the Comets or the AHL players, in that I want to be proven wrong. I don't say like Gadjevich has bad skating or Lind, like he might be something, but like it's still way too early to tell if he can string it together. I always want to be proven wrong because there's nothing more than the Canucks need than guys to come out of nowhere and provide meaningful minutes for them.
Right. And there is, I mean, sometimes we make a little too much about it, of a deal over it, but there is something to the idea that sometimes some players who don't necessarily look as amazing at the AHL level, could suddenly do something decent at the NHL level just because of the way the game is different and it changes like, depending on the speed level, the size level. There are situations. We often throw that out too often. We definitely throw that idea out too often. Yes, you're wagging your finger at me.
Yes, because there's an interesting thing about this. Jim Benning, when he was talking about Olli Juolevi, and we kind of made fun of it a bit because he said his game will look better at the NHL level just because of the way he plays. And everyone's like, if he can't skate at the AHL level, it doesn't matter. Like, he's not going to be able to skate well at the NHL level. And that still kind of holds true because obviously the Canucks don't trust him or his skating enough to play him over like Jordy Ben. But take, for example, like a player like Will Lockwood, who, in my opinion, looked great in the training camp for this season. He obviously is super green and wasn't ready for like a taxi squad consideration or like NHL games, but he has NHL skating. He has NHL wheels. He has the tendency to display really good hands in tight and creating great offense. The problem is he hasn't found consistency in scoring at the AHL level. But I know for a fact that if you put him in NHL action, just his raw attributes and the little things would probably translate to the NHL just as fine as it does in the AHL right now. He's just lacking that punch as a scorer, basically. But he basically plays like a Tyler Mott. Like, he's crash, bang, boom, heavy skating, heavy forechecking, and he can penalty kill. Like, that's the kind of guy that like they would want to be able to succeed in the NHL, even if it doesn't really look that great at the AHL level. I mean, that's just my opinion.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I mean, there are like, I even think like in just like my regular everyday life, like I think about these cases where like, say the speed changes depending on like your work or whatever. Like, I know in my personal experience, just the way my brain is, that if if it's a slow day at my job, I make more mistakes then than when I do when it's fast paced, because just of this idea that my head's second guessing myself a little bit less, second guessing myself less, and I'm just acting on instinct. And where that totally like tracks that NHL player, that there are players out there that because the speed picks up at the NHL level, that you would be more correctly making better choices at that level just because it's going a little bit more at your personal pace. That is something that happens that can happen with certain individual players. One player who has looked very good at the AHL level and arguably could have gotten a chance at least once at the NHL level so far is Jack Rathbone. Holy,
yeah, man.
Guy has 5 points in 3 games and has looked good doing it. How are you feeling so far about what he's shown for Utica?
He's a bust, man. He's never gonna make it. Probably trade him while you still can because he sucks. No,
oh man, God.
I have a bone to pick with Thomas Drance a bit because I tweeted out like a video of Jack Rathbone kind of wheeling through center and getting off a shot attempt. And he was basically like, he didn't look ready. He shouldn't play NHL games at any point or whatever. And I have to push back on that a bit because, frankly, this team rolled out Jalen Chatfield for 5 games. They rolled out Olli Juolevi for 15 or whatever, and he was barely okay in sheltered minutes and looked slow as fuck. I don't have time for the argument that Jack Rathbone wasn't ready because this team has a history of putting guys who aren't ready into unfavorable positions, and they look all right. Like, all things considered, was Hoglander ready for the NHL? I don't know, but he overperformed and looked great and has looked great since. You could have given Jack Rathbone a game just to see what his skating could do at the NHL level. Because his skating is unbelievable at the AHL level. The guy is just making fools out of the defenders and the forwards of the AHL's top lines. Like, he looks unreal. So if you can make room for a guy who has proven that he cannot score for shit at the AHL level just because he's big, you can make all the time in the world for a kid like Jack Rathbone, who is basically like Quinn Hughes light in terms of skating and offensive panache.
Nice.
So,
like,
anyway.
I mean, and you know, I remember that kind of a similar case with like Bowen Byram when he was playing for the Giants last. I guess that was technically last season. I guess like it seems ago. Like years. It seems like years ago. But I remember Bowen Byram, his skating level was so much better than everyone at that level that it really did feel like, well, like he shouldn't be at the he has learned basically all he can. He's done all he can at this level.
Yeah.
And that in itself kind of goes into my last question, specifically surrounding junior hockey. Obviously, the way the AHL and the junior hockey leagues in Canada are structured, if you're under 20, whether or not you feel like a player is ready for that for a pro hockey, if they're not playing in the NHL, they have to go back to the CHL, to their CHL club. And one of those cases is a guy, Seth Jarvis, who's playing for I believe the Chicago Wolves. Yeah. And now he's going back
to the Winterhawks,
to the Portland Winterhawks. I obviously don't know how much you're following the Wolves or his play or anything, but have we gotten to when you get to a point where a junior hockey player is leading the AHL in points, but is being forced to go back because of his age, because his arbitrary age number, has it come to the point where now it's time to revisit the way that system works? Should the NHL be taking a closer look at why they're sending players back to junior, even if they've shown that they can play at a higher level?
Oh, absolutely. They should have done this years ago because it's never made sense for me to see players like there's obviously not that many players who are looking to make the jump from the AHL at the age of, 17, 18 or whatever it is. Right. But they should have the option if they are ready to do so. And the AHL team should be able to like draft them, and they should really make this like a development tier instead of just like this awkward pro league that isn't quite a development league and isn't quite a like pro league. It's like an awkward state of flux. And you have, I think Patrick Johnson had it in his notes today that the Swedish leagues have 16-year-olds playing in pro leagues.
Yeah, Pettersson was playing in the SHL.
He was playing in the SHL.
Before he got here, and Podkolzin's playing in the KHL. You have you have lots of Canucks prospects who've gone through, who just because they weren't born in North America were able to play pro hockey earlier.
Yeah, so it serves no purpose if a player is physically ready or like just based off of their raw skill, like inherently ready to play against men, to stick them to the WHL or the CHL because of some arbitrary rule they set up. Like, I don't understand how a 21-year-old or a 20 going on 21-year-old is stuck playing against 16 and 15-year-olds is better for him in the CHL versus him being able to make the jump and, advance his play for the betterment of Hockey Canada. It doesn't make sense to me. It should have been looked at ages ago, but for whatever reason, obviously, Hockey Canada hasn't evaluated their agreement. I believe it expires at the end of this year. However, the current CHL AHL agreement, so maybe things will change for the betterment of these players. But like Seth Jarvis, if he's lighting it up, keep him in, let him light it up.
He shouldn't have to go back if the team that he's drafted to. If his draft team feels like, well, hey, this guy's doing all right here, we're just going to leave him here and see how it goes. Yeah. And then maybe there should be just a window of option where you can send him back to junior if you feel that's in the best interest of the player later on. But exactly. Why does it have to be this weird situation where, nope, you're 20, you can't go back? It only makes it harder for the player to develop. If a guy's it only makes his timeline longer by doing so. You're theoretically missing out on longer good returns on players because you're just making them go back to a league they've already conquered based on their age.
Yeah, they're basically just committing to stunting the growth of a bunch of players for no actual purpose that benefits anyone, not even the league. Do you think the Vancouver Giants are the Winterhawks are going to be making millions of dollars because Seth Jarvis is coming back to an empty arena? No, they get nothing out of it.
Oh, right now they don't. I will say that I do think those teams care in a normal year where
in a normal year for sure, but especially now.
Bowen Byram sold tickets for the Giants, I'm sure. Those games definitely attracted attention because of how highly touted a prospect he was. But
if it's a financial thing, then if these players like Seth Jarvis are signed to their 3-year ELCs and their WHL or CHL team wants them back, there should be an option in the ELC that says you pay out to that CHL team to get them in the AHL. Everyone wins, and it doesn't have to be here's a $20 million out clause. It can be you would have made.
It'd have to be something more manageable than that.
It would have been you would have made $60,000 or whatever on merchandise or your own.
Maybe it's just
success.
The value of their contract, frankly.
Whatever their ELC is. So if it's an $837,000 first year ELC, then they get $83,000.
Yeah, maybe it's something like that, right? Perfect. Exactly. There you go.
Then it incentivizes CHL teams to actually develop players that are ready for the AHL in the first year of their ELC. Boom. Bingo. Now there's more commitment from a CHL team to play to develop players that are NHL or AHL ready rather than teams that are just playing for playoff revenue and CHL Memorial Cups type shit, right? There's way more incentive. Yeah. There's way more incentive for both on everyone's side if the agreement changes to something like that. So hopefully that happens.
Right, and I think that's pretty much all we need to cover on the Comets this week. Do they have a game? They have a game on this weekend at all? They play?
No, they played this past Wednesday, and then they're off until next Wednesday. So that's good for me because I didn't really feel like tracking Wednesday's game this weekend. So this gives me an extra couple days to dawdle on my tracking. I really appreciate that. I'm not a big fan of the back-to-backs because that means the weekend is spending 8 to 9 hours but staring at a screen and recording every takeaway, giveaway, shot attempt.
You know what? You're doing great work, and you're doing work that we here in Vancouver really appreciate. And
cheers, man. That means a lot. speaking of doing God's work, if you liked what you heard today, you can check us out on our YouTube channel. You can also subscribe, rate, and like us on your favorite podcast streaming service. And if you appreciate the work you're doing, don't forget to check out the Patreon. We have $1 tiers and $5 tiers for exclusive content that we will be putting out. Lachlan's always got his was it the standings review thingy?
Oh yeah, the North Division power rankings.
Yeah, the power rankings. I was trying to remember.
They're up every Sunday on lachandthecrease.com. And in terms of the bonus podcasts, we definitely will have some of those coming out sooner rather than later, especially now that as of today, WandaVision just wrapped up, and I know I want to do some movie pods. We have the backlog.
I have not watched WandaVision yet.
Oh, well, even if you don't get on that, I'm sure we can find some, I know there are plenty of guys in Canuck land who we can get on to talk about it. Because, I mean, like, if you go back in our backlog of old episodes, I mean, we have we have episodes talking about The Mandalorian Season 1, The Last Dance, they're there, and I definitely want to go back and do Mando Season 2, as well as the first season of WandaVision, so that's going to be coming. Yeah. Our movie spin-off pod is going to be definitely firing on all cylinders sooner rather than later, as well as some hockey stuff. We're going to have hockey stuff there. Yeah. And as far as where you can find my stuff, you can find me on lachandthecrease.com, and you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at lachandthecrease.
And Cody, you can find me at cometsharvest.com and on Twitter at Cody Sievertson. Share my profile because I'm at 999 followers. And
are you still? Oh my God, so
I got one more.
Guys, he's one more follow away. Get your mom. Get your mom and dad. Just follow.
Yeah, I got great stuff on there. I got a lot of memes. Okay, I'm putting a lot of work for you guys.
Lots of memes that they will understand.
Yeah, they'll definitely understand some of the memes I'm figuring out. But until then, folks, we despite all the hair pulling and brain melting in the first half of this episode, this was really fun to do. It was a chaotic day on Friday in Canuckland, and we'll hope to see you on next week for our Tuesday or our Wednesday, or what is it?
Tuesday episode. You got it right.
Tuesday episode, when we'll be recapping the back half of this Toronto series. Hopefully some more crazy news comes in, or some more Jim Benning quotes come in, because this was a lot of fun to just go over the craziness and insanity.
And another game on the Tyler Toffoli revenge tour by that point as well.
Ooh, yeah, baby. It'll be spicy. Till then, folks, this was great. We'll catch you guys later. Bye.
Bye.